If you want to know the fastest settings in Gran Turismo 7, then you're in the right place. Whether you want to achieve the time trial golds, get faster in sport mode, minimize those frustrating mistakes, and generally enjoy Gran Turismo 7 much more, knowing that your settings are not holding you back. What's up guys, I'm Chris Doughty, aka Doubtinator. Welcome back to the channel. I've been sim racing for over 30 years. I've played all of the Gran Turismos. I have over 1,000 hours in Gran Turismo 7 already. I'm an A+ rated driver in sport mode. I've never ever missed a gold time in online time trial. Hit gold in every single circuit experience and all gold in every single license. I had already made a video covering the fastest settings in Gran Turismo 7, but Gran Turismo 7 has been out for 3 years now. We've had 58 updates and at least 6 of those have had significant physics changes, so I thought it was time to revisit this topic and go through all of these settings again to let you know what is the fastest settings to use, whether you're using a wheel or a controller, whether you're a beginner or a pro. I'm going to tell you how to get everything absolutely perfect. I will be covering controller settings and also assist to let you know which is the best things to use. To get to these, you want to go from the pre-driving menu, click on settings, and the first thing we'll go through is assists. So click on assists. Starting off with the assist preset selection, this allows you to choose from a bunch of predetermined variables with beginner, intermediate and expert. We don't really want to do this because I'm going to talk you through what each of them does, so we're going to leave it set to custom. Now we're going to skip straight to the visual driving aids. These are the aids that have no effect on the way the car drives. These are just visual cues to help you. So head down to driving line assist, and the first option is corner indicators. So the corner indicators are yellow waypoint markers which give you clipping points where you need to be before you turn in. So here you can see on the right side of the track, this is where we want to be slowing down, and as that disappears we start to turn in. The second one in the middle of the corner is the clipping point, and then you go to the exit point here. Essentially, if you were to drive to hit each of the way markers as you're driving through, this should give you a nice line for all the different corners on the track. These are useful to help you know where the clipping point is, where the apex is for each of the corners, and also where the turn-in points are. It's going to stop you from turning in too early, it's going to stop you from apexing too early, and can be quite useful as a visual aid. We can also access the assist menu from the pause menu while driving. Head across to settings and then to assist settings. Down to driving line assistance again, and I'm going to turn off the corner indicator and I'm going to turn on the driving line. Now this gives you a driving line. This is a predicted optimum driving line for any track that you go to. It can help you to learn new tracks. It is not a dynamic driving line, so it always stays the same colour, unlike some other games which change colour if you need to brake or not. Now the driving line does help you to understand where you need to position your car, to the outside of the track, clipping to the inside, and then moving to the outside on corner exits. The downside with this ideal line is it can be rather conservative when it comes to letting you know what track limits you can use. Into turn 1 at Sardinia, for example, we can be way wider than the ideal line is showing us, to allow it to carry much more speed into the corner and that speed through to corner exits. So it can give you an idea of where you should position the car, but you are going to be a little bit compromised if you stick strictly to this racing line. Okay, I'm going to turn that off now and go to the next setting, and that is the braking indicator. So this is just a toggle to turn it on, and I'll show you exactly what that does. So the braking indicator gives you an on-screen HUD display for when you need to get on the brakes. You see where my gear selection is. If you're approaching a heavy braking zone, it will start to blend in a red colour. You'll see where the gear selection is shown at the bottom of the screen. As we approach the braking zone, it will start to increase in the brightness of red, and as soon as we need to get on the brakes, it starts flashing and brake is on screen. And actually it's pretty good timing. It is a dynamic indication, so if you're going faster into a braking zone than you have done before, it will start to flash up earlier. If you're carrying a little less speed in, it will flash up a little bit later. So it's a dynamic braking reference. It's quite a good little HUD feature that actually is rather useful. It's not too disturbing, it doesn't put stuff on the track. It's quite a non-disturbing feature. I quite like it. I'm just going to turn brake indicator off and turn on braking area, and I'll show you exactly what that does. So the braking area has a similar effect and operation to the braking indicator, but it is painted on the track, and you see where the red line is the braking zone. That is your braking zone. It is a dynamically operating braking zone. The faster you go, the further down the track the braking zone appears, and you have the board above you. And I find it's quite close, but because it's a dynamically moving marker, and essentially it uses an AI prediction of how fast you need to be in the corner as to where you need to brake. I find it, for some cars, it can be a little bit too early. Driving with all of those visual assists turned on, you can get actually a good idea. If you're learning a track like the Nordschleife, for example, with so many corners, then it really will help you to learn a brand new track. However, I do think if you start using these as references, then you will start to limit your potential to go faster, because most of the fast drivers don't use these settings, and also a lot of the people that call out lap guides, etc., they will basically call out references, scenery references or track references to be the braking points. So into turn 1, for example, I use the start of the curb as my braking reference point, and that is what I used here, and I've got 1,000 other different confusing things going on for me. Running down into turn 1 again, except this time we've got none of the references turned on at all, and I use the start of the curb as my braking reference point, and it's just a much cleaner process for me to go through that corner without all of the stuff on screen. It allows me to have more visual immersion when I'm driving the car as well. So of all of the visual references, I actually think the braking indicator would continue to be the most functional without being too distracting for the immersion experience. If you're learning a brand new track, feel free to leave all of these on to get yourself dialed in as to where the braking points are. But as soon as you can, I would recommend to get these turned off. Now let's talk about the assists, which have a direct effect on the car as you're driving. And the first one at the top is transmission. It's quite simply whether you want to be in manual or automatic gears. Automatic gears in Gran Turismo 7 actually work quite well. The AI shifts pretty good for the way you use the gears and the way the car drives. I'm sure it's 100% possible to get gold in every single time trial in Gran Turismo 7 using auto gears. It isn't going to hold you back too much. There are benefits to using manual gears, however, and those benefits are essentially allowing you to choose what gear you want to be in for each of the corners. At the end of a long straight, for example, going down through the gears, I want to exit in second gear, but I want to be in first gear for the middle part of the corner, and it allows me to just change gear up on corner exit to kill those high RPM spikes you get when you're in a low gear, and a bit of rotation is, as you select a lower gear, it does get the car to rotate more. Again, in the slow speed corners, all the way down to first gear, the car will rotate a little bit better. Short shift to second gear on corner exit, and that'll kill the aggressive acceleration you would get in first gear usually. Another benefit of manual gears is some cars in Gran Turismo 7 like to be short shifted. They have a very low power band. This Aston Martin DP100, for example, is exactly like that. I'm in automatic gears right now. I've got my foot flat to the floor at full throttle, and I'm allowing the AI to change gears in automatic. It's trying to rev out, and it's just not really shifting up when we need to be shifting up in the power band. Finally into fifth gear, and we're going to start to creep forward. So we only got to 11th place, and we hit the first 200 board at 29 seconds, 0.203. Now, without changing anything at all, I'm going to switch to manual gears, retry this, and I'm going to be short shifting. This car really likes to short shift, so I'm going to shift almost just before it gets to the bar. So third gear up to fourth gear, almost hit the wall there, get into fifth gear early, and we're really starting to pass the cars already. This car has insane low down torque, and we're just going to short shift through here. So we're already up to 11th position, 10th position, starting to really just power through. And yeah, you see guys, so much difference in the way the car pulls the gears specific, and just before the 200 board, here we go, and get there in 27 seconds. So we're going to save 2 seconds on the straight, which is absolutely insane. There aren't many cars in Gran Turismo 7 that behave like this one. However, when you do get to drive one, manual gears makes a huge difference. And then the final benefit with manual gears is short shifting. Again, helps to conserve fuel. So if it's a difference between a one-stop strategy or a two-stop strategy, a little bit of short shifting can save enough fuel just to get you to save a whole pit stop. Traction control is the next one to discuss, and from the pre-race menu before you drive, you can set the default traction control levels. So this is what it will be when you start any race in Gran Turismo 7. And then as soon as you go to the track, the MFD setting for traction control will be set to whatever you had it set to. Now you can use the D-pad to just scroll through the MFD, and traction control is adjustable on the fly as you're driving, which is very, very useful. If you were to hit the pause menu, go to settings and down to assist settings, the traction control default, you can't select it because you're currently in the race. The only way you can adjust the pre-race default is from the pre-race menu. While you're driving, you have to use the MFD to change traction control. With regard to which is the best settings to use, this is very much car and driver specific. The fastest way to get around the track is for the driver to be skillful enough to drive without any traction control at all. However, in a high-powered rear-wheel drive car, then it sometimes can be much more safe and therefore much faster in overall race time to use a little bit of traction control. Let me demonstrate now. So we've got no traction control at all. We will just coast into the final corner at Tsukuba. When we see the marshals on the right hand side disappear off screen, we're going to boot it with the same amount of steering lock and the car will just spin out. Let's repeat that process again and just add in 5 traction control. Same process again. I'm going to turn into the corner, coasting in until we see the marshals disappear off the screen, absolutely boot it, and we kind of just understeer. The throttle is being limited by the traction control, and it actually is quite limiting on traction control 5. We can boot it, the rear will slide a little bit, but it's very much under control. The throttle is cut before the car gets crazily out of control, and you've got the levels from 0 up to 5 incrementally to change how much this effect actually has. And this is where you want to drive the car and see how you feel driving the car. Let's repeat that turn 1 process using 2 traction control to see if that is enough to stop the car from spinning out. So I'm going to cruise around here, marshal disappearing, boot it onto the gas, and even on traction control level 2, it does limit the amount the car spins. It does want to rotate on throttle still, and it's probably a better amount than 5. 5 was very prohibitive, and with it on 2, it even still is quite safe. Let's drop it down to 1, see how the car drives. Again, it still slides, it's still pretty manageable. The fastest drivers in Gran Turismo 7 often do not use traction control except for when it rains. I've seen many fast drivers in Gran Turismo 7 just switch up to traction control 2 or 3 in the wet weather conditions. My recommendation is for you to use this as a tuning aid depending what car you're driving, depending what track you're driving, depending what weather conditions you are in. The next setting to discuss is ABS, and I would highly recommend leaving this on ABS default. It will work for 99% of all situations. You'll get gold times with this. You will not be limited at all leaving ABS on default. I'll show you how much of a nightmare the car is to drive. By braking just after the path, and we're just locked up there. I just can't get the car to stop at all. It really does lock and just plow straight on. It's so difficult to drive in Gran Turismo 7 with ABS turned off. Let's just try again one more time into the corner. You really have to get the braking in a straight line to get the car to stop, and it just won't stop. It's so difficult to drive. I'm going to see an example of this right now from the off-board shot. Just get on the brakes, locking the inside tyre, and just straight to the scene of the accident. A viable option that is a little bit in between off and on is weak, ABS on weak is very much still like having a good ABS system. The ABS system in Gran Turismo 7 is really good. However, it is a little bit less intrusive, so what will happen if the car has a tendency to oversteer on the brakes? Having ABS set on weak, the car is more likely to oversteer even more than it would on ABS on default. If the car has a tendency to understeer on the brakes, then again this kind of driving characteristic is amplified. So if you've got a car, some drivers actually have found it to be faster using ABS on weak because they want to amplify the characteristic that the car has. But in many cases it just adds a little extra level of complication to the way the car drives, and we're only talking a couple of tenths of a second in some very specific situations where ABS on weak is actually going to be better than ABS on default. I would highly recommend leaving ABS on default all the time. The auto drive option allows a little bit of brake and steering assistance. This is for very new drivers to sim racing games. I'd recommend you start with this off straight away and just start to learn the basics of sim racing. Replace car after leaving track is a little bit of an assistance to help you to get back on track if you need it, but I'm not sure how useful it really is. Let me just demonstrate what it does. So with it turned on, we're going to continue. So I've just understeered off the track here, and it's going to give me a countdown. If I can't find my way back to the track, it's going to return me to the track, and it gives me an auto drive, and then off we go again. I think it's immersion braking. I don't like that feature, but if you have a problem where you fly off the track, I think Willow Springs Raceway is probably the great example where this could be useful, because you can go off the track for such a long time, get completely lost, and you'll respawn back onto the track with a little bit of auto drive. So maybe some of these weirder tracks like Willow Springs where you can run off for such a long time, it could be useful, but I personally leave it turned off. Final two settings are active stability management and counter steer assistance. I have them turned off all the time. I have seen other people use them with pretty good effects, certainly in some wet weather conditions, but I find the car just doesn't quite drive as I want it to. I've got a bit of a disconnect with the way the car drives because there are external forces acting on the car which help to stabilize the car. I think these settings could hold you back in the future, so I'd get these turned off as soon as you can. Okay, now let's talk about controller settings, and let's start specifically with the PS5 or PS4 controller. You can access the controller settings menu from the pause menu, settings and controller settings, or from the pre-driving menu. So you can open and change button configs if you want to change which buttons do which on the controller. That is completely down to personal preference. The one I want to cover first is controller steering sensitivity. This has a range from -2 all the way up to 10. I think the default is probably 0, but we're going to test the extremes to let you know what they actually do. So I'm going to start with -2 on controller steering sensitivity, and what this is how quickly the steering stick allows the steering to get to its maximum lock that it's allowed to be at. And -2 has the smoothest transition from 0 to having the right amount of lock on for each of the corners, so the car will feel a little bit lazy. You can really be aggressive with the steering stick, and the car is quite lazy to turn into the corners. Switching it up back to all the way up to 10 and switching down to continue, and the car is just much more keen to get turned in to the steering angle that you input into with the controller. I think the car feels good and sharp on controller input sensitivity at 10, but if it's feeling a little bit too sensitive for you, you can just turn the value down a little bit. Now it's important to note that when you are steering into the corner, that is where the controller sensitivity has an effect. As soon as you turn the stick to 0, it's quite a quick sharp snap back to 0, so you're never going to find yourself hanging in the corner even when you want to go straight on again. The next two settings, which are PS5 specific, is the trigger effect. The PS5 has adaptive triggers, and my personal preference for this one is to turn both trigger effects to be off. Specifically playing in Gran Turismo 7, the way to drive and be fast is to just follow a process rather than to try and react to what the car's doing. In Gran Turismo 7 there are set braking points when you want to hit them, and then you roll off the brakes to a certain measured amount. There are certain turning points, certain acceleration points, and I find with the adaptive triggers they fight against me doing what I want to do with the controller on the brakes, rolling off the brakes, and then on the gas, rolling onto the gas. So I find it much easier to modulate the throttle smoothly without the triggers working against me. Now this could be driver preference. If you have got used to the way the triggers are feeling when they're at the adaptive resistance triggers, and this might be driver specific. If you're already used to the way the car feels with the adaptive triggers, then I would recommend probably just to stick with it how it is, but maybe just turn them off, run 5 laps and see how it goes for you. Next setting is for VR users only, and I currently don't have VR, so this is just to allow vibrations when you have car collisions. Again, this is up to you. This is however you want to play the game. Down at the bottom 2 settings, these bottom 2 settings are specifically for force feedback wheels. They have no effect if you're using a controller. The bottom one for me, force feedback sensitivity, this almost feels how tight the wheel is with regard to the aligning forces, and force feedback maximum torque is how strong you want those force feedback forces to be. This in itself is a very complicated and detailed subject, but luckily for you guys I've got a full comprehensive video guide specifically on wheel controller force feedback settings. It's the video that's on screen right now. Go and check that one out and you'll learn everything you need to know.